Hey, it's KR talking today about what heroic fantasy means to me, or I guess better yet, what it is to be a hero in a fantasy RPG setting. But I use that heroic fantasy because there's oftentimes a perception that by hero, we mean that the player characters, it's a system where they have these classes where you have all these different levels and powers and feats. And when you get up to the higher levels, 15th, 16th, you become, these super almost demigods. You become heroic, right? That's what the level that is described. And you're doing all these deeds, as opposed to a grim, dark, low magic setting where you never get all these powers. You never get to fight, demons or devils or whatever. It takes a super long time. And that is somehow opposed to heroic fantasy, where in fact, I would say in many ways, almost the opposite is true in terms of what it is to be a hero. I think you can be a hero in a setting where you get up to all these levels and have all these powers, just as you can be a hero in a setting where you have very few. Very rules light, very rules dense. There's all sorts of opportunities to be a hero, but the hero doesn't come from power. It doesn't come from abilities. It comes from inside the player character and their actions and the choices that they make. That's where heroes come from. So an example would be, a bandit group is harassing a village and a bunch of first level characters decide they're going to take him on. And in that system, he's third or fourth level, these guys. Well, that's you could say it's reckless or stupid, but it's certainly what a hero does. A hero says, I'm not going to let this village just be preyed upon by these bandits. So they make a stand. That's what heroes do. Now, let's say they're 15th level in this third level band. They just come in and blast them a few spells or whatever. They wipe them out and they save the village. Villagers are just as glad, but that's not really heroic. That's just kind of bullying. That's kind of pushing around people. They're not very strong. You didn't have to risk anything. Because that risk, when you are risking, when the stakes are such that you may die, you may lose everything, but I did it anyway because I made that choice. It was important to me. That's heroic, right? When St. George went after the dragon, he could have been killed. I think of that movie, The Dragon Slayer, where the wizard's apprentice has to go in slay the dragon. The odds are way against him. And, he's sort of a reluctant hero, but he does it. And he is a hero because at the moment of truth, he comes through. Another classic, Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, right? His aunt and uncle are killed. He's furious and he's going to do whatever it takes. Now, he has a lot of inborn abilities that come out, as a Jedi Knight. But still, there's also and he loses a bunch of times too. They all do. That's another thing about heroism. You can lose when you take chances. Whereas the 15th level, again, if we get to these epic battles where they're fighting, hordes of demons or something, and you just look at the odds or whatever and see that, okay. But again, that gets down to heroism being about levels of power against each other or, my CR versus yours or things like that, when in fact, that's not what a hero worries about. A hero is out to address some wrong or do something where they must risk everything because the cause is right. And I mentioned all those stories, Luke Skywalker being a classic. It's the farmhand who, emerges and goes to war and becomes a hero. It's the orphan that rises up from nothing and knows what it's like to be oppressed and always takes their side. And they are transformed by these activities because the high-level characters have already gotten there. They're not going to necessarily change, but the low-level ones, the heroic deeds that they do and the renown that they get and the success that they have in taking a stand when they know it's right, that's heroism. And to reiterate the point, sometimes in a grim, dark, mud-soaked world of low magic, the heroism is easier to see than in something where you have these high-level, NPCs running around that have all these abilities. But it's all the same thing. It's all dependent on as you go through levels of your characters and you can incorporate their abilities and whatnot. Because a lot of heroism isn't just fighting. So when you have players with abilities and skills that are not fighting related, they can use those in heroic ways to subterfuge and sneaking into places and, setting up sort of role play situations where they're still risking everything. That's the thing. A hero has to risk things. A hero has to take things on that it could cost them everything. It's funny too, because when I've been running with players and they get into a TPK situation, And almost always the players will not want to run away. Let's say 1 or 2 are down or whatever. They wanna stay with their compatriots. They wanna be a hero. They don't wanna be a person that just says, "Well, this is kinda going wrong." You do have people that will say, "My character's a coward," or "My character's frightened." But even then, they'll stay longer than they really would, and they'll try to come back. They'll try to save them. This especially becomes difficult when it's a monster or a foe that's gonna eat the players. So they know if I leave. And then what will happen is the players that are going down will tell the other players, "You know what? If I go down, just run. Just leave. We've gotta survive." I've seen players wade in saying, "I'm gonna take these on, distract them. You guys run off. My character will die." I've had it happen a bunch of times. That's heroic. That's saving your group, giving up your life, your character. And again, we roll up another character and we move on, but, we think about those characters and everybody remembers them, the sacrifice they gave. That's the person we remember, not the super powerful person that just swept everything aside. It's the person who risks, and you players want to do that. They want to be heroes. We play this game. We don't necessarily want to play heroic fantasies of just, "Oh my God, next feat, I get this feat, and then I get that spell, and this and that, I'll be..." No, we want to have opportunities to prove our worth in a heroic way. So as GMs, we're always thinking of how can we set up situations where the players can be heroic. The obvious ones are just a village that can't pay but needs to be protected. They just do it out of the goodness of, they're mad that these people are on them. But there's other chances to be heroic. If an enemy surrenders, do you just kill them, or do you instinctively say, I'm going to let them live? Now, again, it might come back to bite you, right? But in movies, that's often what heroes do. They do the right thing, and it doesn't always, eventually the person comes back and does something. Then they might just kill him. I gave you one chance. Maybe that's the hero's rule, right? But and another element of that is the small deed can be as heroic as the large one. So if you see someone being harassed in the street, again, you're setting this up as a GM, and the players come over and say, "Hey, get out of here. Leave this person alone." And that person's like, "Really? Who do you think you are? Right? I'm going to get you. I'm going to whatever." Well, that shopkeeper or that person or whatever that person is that was being harassed is very grateful. "Thank you, sir. May I get you something? I will buy, come to my tavern and I'll give you free food," or come, whatever. They're very grateful because that was brave. That was heroic. And then the players can get information from this person forevermore. They have allies. Other people see what they're doing. That minor level of renown, and in some ways more gratifying than the being feted by the kings and queens when you're at high levels. The ordinary people recognize that you acted heroically at a low level. And in that sense, I think we should think as GMs to reward the intention as opposed to, I don't know, the optimization. I don't know how you think about this, but if the players are intending to do things that are heroic, right, and it's beyond their abilities, you can reward them. Again, there's a fine line between foolish and heroic. So you always got to remember that. And you can, the warnings we give as GMs. This is going to be really tough. You've heard this is deadly, blah, blah, blah. The swamp of infinite evil. You really want to go there. But when they are doing things with the intention, the heroic intentions, you can cut them a little slack. We're all on their side as GMs. You don't want to make it you don't want to make it like, "Oh, all we have to do is if I act really heroic, i.e. foolishly or recklessly, KR is going to help me out." Oh, no, if I give you some warnings, you got to be careful. But I'm always thinking about the fact that the players want to be heroes. That's why they're playing this game. That's why we started off. That's why we loved it so much. That's why we like movies and books and, the hero, in the end, even if they sacrifice everything, there's books where, and movies where the hero dies, but we know why they die. They gave up the full devotion thing because they're heroes. That's what they do. And that's what players want to do. So just remember, the heroism is not based on the system. It's super heroic fantasy to me is just a fantasy setting where the players have an opportunity to act heroic, whatever the system it may be. It's from inside the characters, in the heart, inside their intentions, inside how they act as heroes. And think about those opportunities you have to set up situations where the players are making choices and making the choice to act heroically. And they will really enjoy it. And a shout out to my Patreon supporters. This week I did a Silver Dragon Wormling. It was really fun. I'd love to hear you, what you think of, that definition of heroic fantasy, how heroism to you. Like the video, subscribe to it, my channel, all that great stuff. Most importantly, my friends, keep playing a RPG game, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.